Well, how did you meet Atlas? Was he from this area too?
Yeah, he was born and raised out there on the hill. Well, I had an older sister, and he went with her a time or two. And then,
You didn't go on a blind date or
no, one day he's pacing the house. We lived over there on the hill on the other side where Leon Powell lives on that road over there. He came by in the buggy, and him and my brother, had run around together a whole lot. So I had an old gun. We had a gun barrel for a poker to the fireplace. So I had my gun barrel, walked out there, and I raised up and said, heads up or heads off. Well, he wouldn't even talk to me. I got mad and went back in the house. So then went to church one night at Sharp and rode with my brother. And another boy wanted me to carry me back home. And before my brother would make up his mind whether he's going to let me go back with that boy or not, Atlas comes along, grabs me by the arm and says, she's going home with me. So that started it.
He'd thought over this gun barrel
Yeah,
business and decided he liked that.
Maybe he did. So then we went together a couple of years and got married.
Well, you did wait till you decided it was the right thing to do.
Well, I don't know whether I waited that long or not, Ray. I don't think we ever know whether it's right or wrong. We just get married.
Well,
And then wonder whether we done the right thing or not. Of course, we lived together. If he had lived until October, he died 19th day of July, we'd been married 60 years.
well, so you were married 50 or more years then, weren't you?
Yeah, we was married 59 years.
59 years. Well,
And when we'd been married 50 years, I broke my leg. When we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary, I had a broken leg.
well, you were kicking up your heels pretty high for a 50th anniversary.
Yeah, I guess so, but I broke my leg.
Well, I'm sorry that spoiled it, but I suppose
It didn't. We went ahead and had the celebration and all the fixings. It didn't. The broken leg didn't stop me. I went right ahead anyway.
well, you seem to have a nice smile and take things pretty well. From talking with you here, I guess maybe that's what Mr. Atlas saw in you that he liked. Was a streak of fun.
I think it was the stubbornness is what he more or less liked. Because I had a stubborn streak. When I wanted it done, and he finally found out. I always told him, you never get around to doing anything or think about doing anything. I suggest it, and then directly you come along and do it. And I said, and after all, I was the one that hatched it up. It wasn't your idea at all. Well, that would make him mad, but he'd go ahead and, do it. Well, I just let him think he was the one that thought it up and all that sort of stuff. A woman has to learn how to deal with a man.
Psychology.
No,
Psychology.
no offense.
Oh, well, all I ever did was what some woman told me. When I was little, my mother told me what to do.
That's just
Now
about it.
Janie tells me what to do.
Whether you do it or not.
And when she's not home, my mom, that's my mother-in-law, tells me what to do.
Well,
You know Miss Blumenberg.
oh, I've known Ruth ever since we was kids.
Well, I'd like to talk about what the area was like around here when you first married.
Well, we had a little bottom road. Well, all the roads are just lanes.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody went, and we used to go to big singing and to the fairs at Benton in a wagon with the mules or horses or whatever you had. And
Did you get a new bonnet for Big Singing Day? A hat?
A hat and a dress and a pair of shoes and a quarter to spend. And you could buy cold drinks and ice cream and all that for a nickel.
Mm-hmm.
A quarter, we got by on a quarter at the big singing.
That was a
All day long we had this quarter.
rather good allowance.
Well, that was a whole lot of money back then.
Yeah.
And, well, I always went to, in summertime, we'd go to Sunday school at Oak Level Methodist Church.
Mm-hmm.
And in the wintertime. In the summertime, we'd go to New Harmony Baptist Church. But there was a Church of Christ over there at Oak Level. Then it was Christian church. You know, they had the organ in it. But I was a little kid, but we went. You know, the Methodists used to come around and wave the hands in the air and tell you how mean you was when you come up to the altar and all that stuff, and the Baptists did too. I don't know whether they still do that or not. They used to. Well, that disgusted me. When we go to the church, that Christian church over there at Oak Level, I made up my mind, if I ever have any affiliation with the church, it's going to be this, because they don't come around and do a whole lot of talking. So that's the main thing, decided me to become.
That's been an interesting church. I did a little research on that. It began as a Church of Christ and operated till, well, I've got it all in an article in the Historical Society Journal, and I'm not certain I remember the exact dates, but let's say it started about, 1880, and then about 1912 or so, it became a Christian church.
Well, see, that's, of course, I was born in 1905.
Mm-hmm. And
Well,
then
we'd go there, and I remember Uncle Bill Schammel and Jack Gatlin's daddy and some of the Hendricksons were members of the Christian church, that church out there.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I remember of him, just Uncle Bill Schammel and his family. He had Roscoe and Rex and Jesse and Ruby and Claude, and all them, you know, was his kids. Well, they were affiliated with that church, and then Mr. Gatlin and some of the Hendricksons went to that was the Church of Christ. And they had this little pulpit, or whatever you call it, and an organ. You know, and they had a Marcus Jones was a preacher there one time. Well, I was a little kid. I'll never forget that. He always walked, and he preached, and he hit the table. And there was a little banister about that high. One day he got overcarried, and he was a-walking and preaching and a-banging that table, and that little table just jumped over that banister, and jumped right out on the floor. Marcus Jones was a preacher. I thought Marcus Jones was the terriblest preacher I ever saw.
Yeah.
He made the table jump out.
Table jumped right over the fence. Well, they operated till, let's say 58 or so, and then they quit, and then sometime in the 60s it was reorganized as a Church of Christ again, and it's still going under that. Now, before we run out of time, I'd like to ask you about when did you move down in this area? You weren't far from Scale, were you?
Well, see, I lived over Pama. North Scale just up the road, 3 miles.
How big did Scale get?
It's a pretty good sized little town. It had a grocery store and a mill where Englishes run a mill where they made ground corn and wheat, made flour, and well, there's more houses up there than there are now.
And there's still, I guess, 6 or 8 houses there at that
Oh,
crossroad.
there's a lot all along just on down through there. See, Lon Lofton lived on the hill, and come on down through there, and all the Englishes lived along there. And then on the other side was Gusty Peck's brother.
Was Palma a somewhat similar sized
Well,
community?
Pama's just a little bit more houses in it now than was then. There's more people live at Pama than there did then. But there used to be 2 grocery stores and a blacksmith shop and a mill. They had a Mr. Norman, Ellie Norman had a mill out there, ground corn and flour and, you know, stuff like that. But all that's gone out of.
There was a school there when I can remember.
Well, yeah, I went to school. That's where I went to school.
And Irvin Poe had a store, I recall.
Well, yeah. But over there at Oak Level now, that's where the Methodist church is. Used to be a blacksmith shop, and the church was back on the back part of the cemetery. They moved it up on the road. And my Uncle Jim Reeves, he had a general store just across the road from where the church is now. And then another store was Mr. Hall. John Hall's daddy
Mm-hmm.
had a little general store. There's two general stores there on Old Level, and we had a doctor, Blewett Helm.
Oh, there was a physician there.
Yeah, Blewett Helm.
Yeah.
And the the Methodist church had that, where the preacher lived.
Parsonage, I
Yeah.
guess. Manse or whatever they call it.
And that's the first wedding I ever saw. One of my daddy's cousins, we called him Uncle Duck Wallace. He married a widow.
You got to go, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was muddy, and they sat in the buggy and got married in the yard.
Yeah, well, that's better than getting your feet covered up in mud.
Yeah.
Well, one other thing I'd like to get in at least, and that is, was it some of your relatives or husband's relatives perhaps that started Maple Hill Church?
Well, that was his brother.
Uh-huh.
He had all the time wanted the church down right here in this neighborhood. And he died, and he had a little money and a team of mules. So they took that little money and the team of mules and built that church, built it. Tom Johnson and A.C. Johnson
Mm-hmm.
made the first concrete blocks. I made them right down to foot of the hill. And they were solid concrete blocks, didn't have a hole.
Yes.
And carried them up there and laid them and built that church building first. And we had church there, and then Mr. Faith, Elmer Faith, he lived right there for the hill. And Irvin Johnson and, several, and they were the leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And that was his mother. And these older ones died. Well, they just drifted off.
Mm-hmm.
So we started going back to Oak Valley. And then Louis Massey, my son-in-law, and Johnny Armstrong, my son, they got together and they're going to start the church back up on the hill. And then Johnny died. So I asked Louis, I said, are you going to let that drop? No, he wasn't going to let it drop. So he went ahead and worked with it and got with some of the rest of them around while they went ahead and went to Oak Valley. Bobby was baptized at Oak Valley. And I reckon Louis was too. And then finally after a while he kept talking, and he finally got it.
And now it's a rather sizable
Yeah.
congregation, well-established, good
Yeah,
building.
we got,
Rudolph, is he the preacher there?
yeah, Ralph's preaching there now. And
Well, that was an interesting thing.
Lake Riley, he got interested in, of course, Lake, Lake, we had that little shop up there at the foot of the hill. That's where Lake started the church. One Sunday he was down here while my husband wasn't a member, while he went all the time. So they went fishing on Sunday morning. And he told Lake he had to get back. See, we had the service at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So he told Lake he had to get back and go to church. So they come back, and Lake lived up here with his granddaddy, Uncle Frank Johnson. So he decided he'd go to church. So he came down, and he come on a few times, and all of a sudden Lake decided he was going to be baptized, and so he did, and then took a notion he was going to preach. So he started, first time he preached, right up there in that little shop. It's just a little shop building up there.
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, Louis talked with him and got it all, and he helped to get the church started back up here at Maple Hill.
Yes.
So we owe a whole lot of that to Lake. Even Lake is one time he told me, of course, I was raised up an old Baptist. And he told me one time he'd love to hold me under the water till he'd bubbled all the old Baptists out of me. Well, then he had a tent meeting over yonder on the hill by the Greek schoolhouse, and he preached till midnight. So as soon as we started home, I said, Lake, you're going to bubble the old Baptist out of me. So he was raised up an old Baptist, too. I said, you're going to bubble the old Baptist out of me, who's going to bubble it out of you?
Well, we're just about out of time. Do you have your most embarrassing moment or something real funny that happened to you you'd like to close off with and tell us about?
Well, there's been so many things, silly things and stupid things happen to me. I wouldn't know where to start at.
Horse ever throw you?
Nope, I rode everything, mules, horses, and everything else, but I never have been throwed.
Well, okay.
But we had an old brown mule. Well, my daddy brought 10 mules from a guy out to Brownsburg, and he told him one was gray and one was brown. So he said, ride the gray mule, let the kids ride the gray mule, but not the brown mule. Well, we lived over yonder on that road coming out from the Highway 68 out there up east. And we had all the Elder Creek bottoms. We owned about half of that up and down through there. Well, my daddy was way down the bottom, about 3/4 of a mile. Well, I was up right on the road, and there's a walnut tree there, and this old mule was hitched to the tree. Well, Mr. Tom Hill was running for jailer. He lived at Elliott. So we had lived by him, you know, and he come by, and I was, and my daddy was sitting with the little kids up there for me to go to the house and get something. Well, I was going to have to walk all the way up to the highway. I looked at that old mule, and I just went taking the harness off. Well, Mr. Hill come up, and he said, oh, what are you fixing to do? I said, I'm going to ride this mule. He said, now, Ritchie, you're not supposed to ride that mule. I said, well, I'm going to try it. So I throwed the harness off, and I patted old Jake a time or two, and I loaded on. He just walked off and carried me on to the house and brought me back, but Mr. Hill went on down there and told my daddy. And when I got back, well, there sat my daddy, big long sweat. I said, what are you going to do with that? You weren't supposed to ride that mule. I said, he didn't throw me. And then next time I saw Mr. Hill, I was mad at him. I said, I don't aim to vote for you because you went and told my daddy I rode that mule.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry we've run out of time. Half an hour just isn't long enough to get everything from Ms. Ritchie Armstrong, Bottom Road, Maple Hill Community, and we thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
This is Ray Mofield. We return you to our studio in Benton.